Welcome to today's conversation: How the War in Ukraine Affects the Church in a Neighboring Country. Sponsored by the Sigmund Rhee Global Mission Center for Christian Education at Union Presbyterian Seminary. The conversation taking place today is similar to the dialogue that happens in our academic classrooms. Union would love to be in touch with you about opportunities to further your theological education. Attend a virtual open house by contacting our admissions office at admissions@upsem.edu. Our special guest is Dr. Wojciech Szczerba, Rector President of Evangelical School of Theology in Wrocław, Poland. Moderating is Dr. Dorothy Tripodi, Director of Supervised Ministry and Vocational Planning for the Richmond campus and Assistant Professor of Supervised Ministry at Union Presbyterian Seminary. Introducing Dr. Szczerba is Dr. James Tonetti, Director of the Sigmund Rhee Global Mission Center for Christian Education and Assistant Professor of World Christianity at Union Presbyterian Seminary. Opening our conversation is Dr. Brian Blunt, President and Professor of New Testament at Union Presbyterian Seminary. Dr. Blunt, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to all of you to this conversation that we're having tonight with our good friend Wojciech Szczerba. He has been a wonderful conversation partner with Union Presbyterian Seminary, and we look forward to the opportunities in the future, as we have had in the past, to be in partnership in the Ministry of Theological Education across international borders with him and his school. We're delighted that he could be here with us this evening, and I know that you will find the things that he will share with us about the situation that is ongoing now, particularly on the border of Poland and Ukraine, and how we think about the work of theological education and ministry and how we might respond to situations such as this one. So we're delighted to have him, and we're delighted to have you here to be a part of this conversation. So let me begin by offering a word of prayer. Let us bow our heads. Dear God of mercy, love, and justice, we beseech you this day on behalf of all those who struggle under the weight of injustice and those who struggle for the right to live lives filled with freedom, hope, and opportunity to thrive. We especially today think of the people of Ukraine. We ask you to lift them up with the presence of your liberating, strengthening spirit and power. We pray for those in neighboring countries like Poland who strive to extend hospitality and hope for those who seek refuge from a war imposed upon them. And we pray that the entire world might not only signal their anger at this brutal invasion of a sovereign country, but that we would use our resources, spiritual, mental, social, material, to understand the situation and to do what we can with such resources to create ways large and small to make a difference. We pray for the power of your presence, for peace in our world, and for the people of our world. And we ask it all in the name of the Prince of Peace, Jesus of Nazareth. In his name we pray. Amen. At this time, let me turn it over to Professor Tonetti. He will introduce our conversation and our discussion partners. Professor Tonetti.
Good evening, friends. Thank you for joining us from across the world. I appreciate you being here, and it is a difficult movement. I wouldn't say delightful to introduce because of the situation that we find ourselves in, with in one of those human turning out to be human disaster. Our hearts are with them, prayers are with them, but here we are in solidarity, in prayers, to listen to those who are in the neighborhood of war, with hundreds of thousands walking across the borders, seeking home. And in this situation, this is the reason why I call it a difficult one. But I also admit that it is a delight to have somebody to sit with and listen to. And this evening, we have two such. And I would start by introducing, of course, these two are good friends, but my colleague, Dr. Dorothy Tripodi, a United Methodist Church elder, did BA in San Diego University, MDiv and THM at Union Presbyterian Seminary, a proud alum, and we are proud of you, Doctor. And Demon at a sibling seminary right here at Wesley Theological Seminary, supervisor of vocational planning and supervised ministry at Richmond campus, and an accomplished scholar. Good to have you, Dr. Tripodi. And it's a joy to introduce the resource person today, and another friend, Dr. Wojciech Szczerba, a leader, educator, administrator, a minister, PhD in patristics from Rector, and another PhD in ancient philosophy, currently Rector, President of Evangelical School of Theology, a leader in ecumenical dialogue initiatives and interreligious dialogue, and a highly respected leader at the national level, having received Silver Cross Merit Award from the President of Poland. It's an honor to have you both, and it is over to you, our moderator tonight, Dr. Dorothy Tripodi.
Thank you, Dr. Tanetti, for this very generous introduction. I join you in stating how grateful I am that we are here tonight to explore the situation and to come together to not only seek understanding of the different contexts and how we have arrived at this point, but also to explore what it is that we can do as we stand together in solidarity, and what we can do as the church to address and support this tremendous human crisis that is developing. And so I'm very grateful to you, to Dr. Szczerba, that you are with us. And our first question tonight is actually a historic context question. According to the Associated Press, Russian President Vladimir Putin justified his invasion in part as defense of the Moscow-oriented Orthodox Church, which has been denounced by Ukrainian Orthodox fractions, as well as the Catholic Church and other Christian denominations and minorities. Pope Francis's visit to the Russian embassy at the Vatican last Friday signaled and expressed this concern that is echoed by so many. My first question to you tonight is, can the churches overcome significant theological differences and rise above what experts have called religious nationalism?
Well, thank you very much for the questions. And well, I have to say it's an honor for me to be here in this cyberspace with you, and that we can discuss these important issues. And well, the question is very important. Can the churches overcome these theological differences? I have to say in the beginning that, well, first of all, I'm a theologian, but I'm also a philosopher. And the older I get, the more philosophical I become. And in philosophy, we don't have heresies. So we ask questions about everything, really. And this is the sense of philosophy, to ask questions. And answers are important, but somehow the questions really the dynamics of the dialogue. So, and so when I'm thinking of this church's overcoming, I would love to say yes, it is possible. There are not so much differences, and when we analyze from a theological or ecclesiastical perspective various traditions within Christianity, I would say that these differences between various churches are really small and insignificant. From, let's say, my distant, let's say, more philosophical perspective, they're really insignificant. When I'm thinking of Catholicism and Protestantism, some time ago I wrote this article about Catholicism, and my conclusion was that really the differences are really minor, and quite often they are anachronistic. In our contemporary world, we don't understand many times what really is the question about. Some of the doctrines, I mean, we understand cognitively, but really we don't live according to Aristotelian metaphysics. So the issue of consubstantiation, transubstantiation, sometimes it's, even if we understand it, it's not really that we live it with all our heart, or at least I don't. Or the issue of filioque, which differentiates the Orthodox and the Catholic Church. Perhaps it is an important issue historically. Perhaps it is important for the hierarchs, but for an ordinary person, I'm not sure. So I would say, yeah, it would be wonderful to see churches overcoming these differences. However, when I'm seeing how churches operate and how they define their identities, it seems to me that quite often these identities are defined against other institutions, other ecclesiastical institutions. And it's very difficult to overcome these differences. Or maybe I would say that the differences that are differently overcome on different levels. So when I'm thinking of, this popular level of, just normal churchgoers, I don't know how it is in the States, but like in my country, there's no problem really of, I don't know, Catholics going to the Lutheran church, or Baptists going to Pentecostal church, or Catholics going to the Orthodox church. No problem with that. Also, when I'm thinking of the academic level, I see no problems whatsoever. I mean, it would be impossible really to write things or do our research without using methods of various scholars. And when I'm writing my articles, I don't even think from which tradition this person is, and then I'm discovering, Meyendorff is Orthodox, and Barth was, of course, Reformed, and King was Catholic, and then he was almost condemned or whatever. So I mean, there is no problem. So it seems to me that the major problem is quite often hierarchical. Those who are leading the churches may have problems in overcoming some issues, and probably from the perspective of the institutions, hierarchical institutions, with their policies and politics, some of the issues are very important. And also, quite often, churches are somehow defined also nationalistically, I would say. So, like in my country, is traditionally associated with Catholic Church, and frankly, the Catholic Church has been there forever. And Russia, Orthodox Church, and Ukraine, Orthodox Church, but Orthodox Church that is subjugated to the Patriarch in Moscow, but also independent Orthodox Church, and there are some problems. And there are also Catholics of the Byzantine Rite who have abandoned the Orthodox Church in 16th century, and they joined the Catholic Church. So there are lots of political issues which create this whole situation. And I would say that the overcoming these differences is very difficult on the hierarchical level. On the level of a normal churchgoer, I'm not sure if these differences still exist, especially in the current situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I appreciate you differentiating what the impact is and what that looks like, and you already brought into the conversation not only the theological perspective but also cultural, perhaps even political perspective. And so the second question in context with this discussion is, could you comment on what in your area is known as sacred lands, the motherland, and the historic and cultural developments that are significant for us to understand as we broaden and integrate this theological approach that you have just brought to us?
Yeah. Well, I think most of religions, not only religions, but let's stick to religions, have these sacred lands or sacred
Yes.
sites. And these are these places that have this predominant special meaning, significance for religions. And they are usually associated with, well, some kind of, special presence of deity, some kind of mythology, or they are somehow revered in a special place. Or maybe there might be some historical elements that are very important for particular religion or tradition. So, for instance, Mecca may be something like this for Muslim people, or Częstochowa in my country, where Black Madonna is very
Yes.
important. Is a sacred land or sacred site for Poles, or Jerusalem might be, well, a sacred place for everybody almost. And I have to say that in the context of this conflict or aggression that we see in Ukraine, from at least as it is announced, Kiev.
Yes.
Or Kiev is becomes some kind of sacred land for, well, both, probably for Russia and for Ukraine. And yes, and we heard in the speeches of Vladimir Putin, and not only him, that he refers to Kiev as the sacred land, as the root of Russia. And true, yeah, in the 10th century, there was the beginning of something what we call Kievan Rus. And yes, and this was the Vladimir the Great who was baptized in Crimea, and this was the beginning of the nation. But this was a nation which really gave the beginning of several nations. So it's very difficult to say today that this is really a core of Russia as we know it today. It is also it might be also seen as a core of Ukraine as we see today, or Belarus, or maybe a few other nations somehow. So claiming that this is a historical core of Russia, I don't know. It seems to me a little bit arrogant, especially in Europe, where there have been so many migrations and where the borders moved so much. Like the city in which I live in and which my school is located, Wrocław.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it used to be Polish till the 12th century for some time, of course. But then we lost it. So then it was for 2 centuries Czech, for 2 centuries Austrian, for 2 centuries German, and now we got it after the Second World War. So whose is it? Whose is this? Well, now it's Polish, but who knows what the future will bring? I don't know. So it would be very arrogant from my side to say that, well, this is Polish and only Polish. I feel that we are really blessed that there have been so many cultures that somehow met in this place. And I think that this is also true about Kiev. And this place that can be somehow seen as important for many cultures, and not only Christians. Also, I would say that, well, in 13th century, there were Mongolian tribes that somehow this area. And I don't know their perspective, but I would not be surprised if there were some voices that also for them it might be important. But I guess, well, it might be, well, from a political perspective, this might be seen as some kind of pretext or argument to do the invasion. And exactly something like this we heard in 2014 when Crimea was taken. And also, in addition to this, to this kind of historical arguments, we hear, and we used to hear, that the aggression is also connected in protecting people, protecting Russians who are in Ukraine, and also protecting Eastern Orthodox people who are in Ukraine. And well, it's very difficult to see how it was really well working or going on in this context.
Yes, yes. We have a question about that has just been posted in the chat, and our participant asks, how would you describe that the hierarchy influences the common people? I mean, we described the interaction between common people, but then we have a very structured hierarchical church. How would you say, what does the hierarchy, how does it impact people? How does it lead, guide, declare doctrines, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, the hierarchy absolutely well influences common people, and well, probably in the past we would see very well natural type of thinking, behaving, living, and well, the kind of relationships were defined by hierarchies quite often, and in many churches. We saw it in the Catholic Church, and we saw it in Protestant churches in the 16th century, and these were not only ecclesiastical hierarchs but also political hierarchs, and
Yes.
quite often they played the same roles. And obviously, in the particularly, this was, I think, strong in the Orthodox traditions, where the borders of Orthodox churches, these patriarchates, they were somehow defined nationally. So even today, we're talking about various patriarchs. Yes. Who are somehow responsible for certain areas and certain nations, really. And just traditionally, we say that the patriarchs of the Constantinople is the highest one, but not always. As you probably know, in the 18th century, when it comes actually to Ukraine, to Kiev, so this the Patriarch of Constantinople gave the right to nominate the Bishop of Kiev to the Patriarch of Moscow. And the Patriarch of Moscow says, their answer would be that this is permanent, whereas the Constantinople would say, no, this was only for this short time, because the decision was taken in the context of the Ottoman invasion or something like that. So yes, in the past we can see this. The influence was really, really strong. However, today, at the end of 20th century, in the beginning of 21st century, I think the situation is much more complicated. Well, many issues. One of them would be the process of secularization that we see, and in this context, in Russia, we saw the influence of communism, really, that was very strong and somehow weakened the role of the Orthodox Church. Then we see globalism also, which makes people, which really broadens the perspective of people. So I would say that, yes, this hierarchy plays very important role. It defines the churches, especially defines the churches as hierarchical ecclesiastical institutions. But then I would also say, there is also this pragmatism of life. So yes. If I could just refer to Richard Rorty and his pragmatism, is that, we can define whatever we want, and we can put borders however we want, but life is what it is, and people live however they live. So we see marriages that are between Catholics and Orthodox people, or Orthodox under Moscow and Orthodox under Kiev. We see atheists who are also participating in this life, and people of other cultures and other religions. So now it seems that this translation of the power of hierarchs into the life of common people, I think it's much more complicated than it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And of course, you're already alluding to the intercultural, interreligious reality that exists, and that reality, of course, now is being impacted by this incredible wave after wave of refugees. So this morning, the BBC reported that now the UN projects over 1 million refugees are streaming into Moldova, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary, and that about 500,000 of those refugees are arriving, if they not have already arrived, in Poland. Western EU countries and the United Kingdom are preparing to accept Ukrainian refugees. How are you and the churches in Poland coping with the refugee crisis? You have Ukrainian students and could you comment also a little bit on what the collaboration between state and church looks like when it comes to these kind of situations of humanitarian crisis?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for this question. I would like to also to refer to the previous one. Just one more comment. Yes,
please.
Putin in his speech says that he would like to free Orthodox people who are under Moscow, but the bishop in Ukraine that is under the Moscow authority says that they are very much against the war. And in the same context, the bishop that is under the Ukrainian umbrella, let's say, also says that they are very much against the war. Also, the Catholics of the Byzantine rites are very much against the war. So it seems that in this context, these churches are united, and this is amazing. So, and I think it's very, very important. And also in my country, I have never seen anything like this, really. So it seems to me that right now the whole country is rising to help those people, and nothing else matters, really. So nobody is talking about COVID anymore. I mean, this whole issue disappeared within a few minutes, really. I mean, nobody pays attention to it. Our country was very divided just 1 week ago, between right-wing nationalistic government and liberal opposition. I mean, nobody even think about it. Everybody is just united to help those people as much as it is possible. And and I have to say that in the past, there were lots of problems and tensions between Poles and Ukrainians, and they were somehow defined historically. But since 2014 and the first aggression, we have had something like 2 million Ukrainians, and most of them are living in Poland right now. And they are really fully accepted by people. I mean, our languages are very similar. Our cultures are very similar. I think they feel fine in Poland, and they are really accepted. And they are very important for our economy, for our cultures. They are in our schools, and everything is fine. So now we see this huge wave that is really coming. And as you say, it's already something like additional million of people that has crossed the borders, and we are expecting few millions of people coming within the next few weeks. And at this point, most of the people are on the east part of Poland, and they are right now they are camping mainly on the railway stations. So people are bringing mattresses and beds and food and clothes and money and whatever they want, so that they would have place to sleep. And the government also gives them right to use free public transportation. They have free access to medical care. They receive coupons for food. And they also have they will have the free access to education and other things. And so this is like governmental actions, which I think are wonderful. They contacted almost all institutions and also ecclesiastical institutions with a simple question: what can you do for the refugees? How many places can you offer? They also contacted my school with the same kind of questions. And I see that churches are somehow united with helping them. So there are thousands of Polish people who are, using their private cars, and they are driving to the east border of Poland, and they are taking these refugees and bringing them to the Central and Western Europe, to their houses quite often. And also churches are turned into shelters, into places where people can eat, where they can stay for some time. And it seems like, all like a national movement somehow uniting people. And it's heartbreaking.
Yes.
We just see women and children, and what can you do really in this kind of situations? They have sometimes they have nothing with them, or maybe one little bag. So they don't have. And it's freezing in Poland, so they don't have shoes or food or clothes. So just my wife just we talked today, and she just says about this old women just approaching her and asking to buy T-shirts because they don't have things to wear. Like old women, after their whole life under communism, under all this, in these difficult circumstances, they should be somehow, I don't know, resting and living a nice life. They had to leave their houses, and they have again nothing really. And there are places like Kharkov or Kiev are turning into Aleppo. So probably we will have no place to return. And it's very sad, really.
Yes, it is absolutely heartbreaking, as you just described, as your wife described, as you are trying to follow up with your Ukrainian students, their families, and it is, yes, it is absolutely heartbreaking. As you described, how church and state are collaborating in terms of these very, very practical, basic human needs for food and shelter and clothing under very sub-frigid conditions. One of our Facebook participants asked the following question. Going back to your description of the Russian Orthodox Church, perhaps the Catholic Church is my addition here, can they play a significant role in preventing further innocent deaths and displacement of people, so that we can find a different way forward? And that,
frankly, I don't think so. I think that
I was afraid you were going to say that. Yes.
Yeah, these are pretexts. What the politicians are using, we just see a horrible dictatorship there, and the theological arguments can be used when they are helpful, but in this case, preventing, I don't think so.
Yeah. Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate you sharing your insight there. Since we are talking about human suffering, we daily now witness this incredible human distress, and the conditions are once again such that people have to make choices that go theologically and ethically against human rights and violate international law. Your seminary, you have shared with us, is located about 2 hours, if I'm correct, from Auschwitz. Your seminary also houses the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Center. Poland's history itself, as you just described, has been marred by suffering. And yet it includes persons like Pope John Paul II, who was a political and social activist and who stood against occupation and religious oppression. How can you reflect on this kind of suffering and teach, perhaps, the Bonhoeffer concept of seeing Christ in every person, especially under such circumstances of trauma and suffering?
Yeah, it's very important. Yes, Bonhoeffer was born in my town, and there were important centers for the confessing church near to Wrocław, Breslau, that cooperated with the White Rose group, and well, there was this famous family von Moltke that they were also referring to this kind of issues. And seeing Christ in every person, it seems easy, really. In this kind of context, and well, when you see other people suffering, to see Christ in every person, we are thinking, yes, of these poor refugees don't having everything. But my question would be, can I see Christ in the Russians? Mm-hmm. Or in a Russian person, and it will be very difficult for me to answer. And well, from Christian perspective, we should be praying not only for Ukrainians but also for Russians. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who are suffering there, who are protesting, who are seeing it from a different perspective, or maybe those who are misled also. And those who, I don't know, agree and support what is going on. But maybe, perhaps, yeah, I mean, if we have to see Christ in every person, we should see Christ in them also somehow, maybe hidden, maybe in some kind of kenosis. But there is also the second part of the saying in Bonhoeffer thought that, well, on the one hand, we should see Christ in every person, but on the other hand, we should act as Christ to every person.
Yes.
So maybe this really goes together. So it's seeing Christ in every person sometimes means acting like Christ to another person. And maybe this is what we should do. Maybe again, these definitions and our cognitive formulas, right, they are beautiful, but really what it means, they become true when we can show our love and interest and care for another person. And then you refer also to Auschwitz, and it's very important, really. And I remember this is after the war, there was this huge movement in Poland, and this was this major question that was asked: where was God in Auschwitz? Yeah. Or is there a place for God after Auschwitz? And then this question was somehow asked, but now we see the last survivors of Auschwitz that are dying. And again, this question appears again, and in the context of this aggression and other problems in the current world. Again, this question seems huge and very important. And I remember this question when it was asked, when Levinas was asked, where was God in Auschwitz? He answered, I saw God in another prisoner. But not everybody answered this way, this question. There was, there were Elie Wiesel, for instance.
Yes.
So he would say, God died on the gallows in Auschwitz. Yes. So you have two answers. You can see one of them saw God in another prisoner, and the other say, no, God died on the gallows of Auschwitz. Which answer was better? Which answer is right? Maybe both, somehow. I can say, even quoting Nietzsche, that God has died. Not necessarily God of love, God of peace, God that I can feel in my heart, but God of, I don't know, previous systems, God of power, oppressive God, maybe has died. Or it's very difficult to answer that. And well, from my, let's say, humanistic perspective, well, I value peace and friendship and honoring another person. And well, when reading Jürgen Moltmann, I totally
Yes.
agree with him that, well, this is really the God who is walking with us and suffering
Yes.
with us and teaching us about peace. But then I'm reading the Bible, especially from my, let's say, heretical philosophical perspective, and I'm asking, really, do I really agree that God of the Bible is God of peace? Really? And when I'm thinking of Christ, and I'm thinking of Christ of the first chapters of Synoptic Gospels, yes, I see this beautiful, wonderful Christ who says, turn your other cheek, go second mile, don't go to trial, or something like this. But then it is not the only picture that we see of Christ in the Bible. The Christ of the I don't know, of the Gospel of Matthew after 21st chapter is very different. The picture of or the image of Christ in some of the Pauline epistles is very different. Apocalypse, I'm not even mentioning that. And then how Christ was interpreted by apostolic and church fathers, very different pictures. And it seems to me that peace was not always as important as it would be for me, especially taking into consideration that the Bible largely was written in a, let's say, pre-feudal context where we have the suzerain and vassal, really, who is somehow subjugated to God, and God is pater familias, really. So quite often the peace is not understood in a democratic way, but is understood as some kind of imposition of the will of pater familias on humanity. So here I have some questions, but still I choose to stick with peace.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, as a Methodist, I have to ask the question: where does human agency in your thinking, in your theological reflection, come in? God's grace, cheap grace, not cheap grace. Am I making sense with that question?
Please say again.
Okay, so the whole idea of seeing Christ in every person and us becoming Christ to other people is part of human agency. Where do you see God's grace at work through human agency? And what does that look like? Which I refer to being Methodist, the whole notion of personal holiness must be connected to social holiness. And how do we do this right now as the church together?
Yes. Well, when I see a person, and I don't care what this person believes in or does not believe in, but when I see a family who has a very small apartment, just like 2-bedroom apartment, and they take another family to live with them for a long time, I think, wow, this is for me real witness of Christianity, really, of taking care of another person. And this is really, this is amazing. And if churches can help with this, if they can somehow be the the wheel of this kind of movement, this would be wonderful. But I think churches are maybe important institutions in our context, but they are not the major driver of this initiative. I think just normal people, they just take their own cars and drive to take those people, and they open their houses, and they give their clothes and their money. And again, I have to ask this skeptical question. I mean, in my country, the church is the richest entity, really. It has so much resources, so much money, so many buildings. This would be a wonderful moment to sell it. I don't know, to share it, to give it away. Will they do it? I don't know. I hope. I think they will not.
Yeah. Maybe the question that was just posted in our chat addresses some of what you just shared with us. Our participant writes, "It's heartbreaking to see the plights of the people due to this unnecessary war, but heartwarming to see how many churches in the area are responding. But is it the church? Is the church providing a temporary cure rather than preventing the disease itself by being voice of the people?"
Yes, I agree, and I would love to see the church acting in a more permanent way, and really, just teaching people peace, cooperation, working together. Is it doing that? I hope so, but maybe what we see now is also some kind of outcome of the antagonistic cultures that were created by churches to a certain extent. I mean, when I'm thinking of religions, and this is perhaps another heresy of mine. So when I'm thinking of religion and theologies that are somehow this intellectual, cognitive expressions of religions, I really think that they have natural tendency to divide people. I mean, this idea of these are us and them. Yes, we are the children of God and they are the children of the world. We are the Church of Christ and they are the pseudo church. As we read in Dominus Jesus 2000, this document. Or we are under the grace and they are outside the grace. And we are already saved and they are condemned. So, I mean, we so often hear this language, and it seems to me that the cultures in which we live are somehow built on this kind of language, and maybe even we are not aware of it now, because these concepts, this theological, medieval, post-medieval concept, they have been translated into some kind of political ideologies. But I think we cannot deny that, somehow churches, institutional churches, has played an important role in creating this type of cultures that we see. And there are several countries in Europe that are really secularized. So Czech Republic may be one of them. 78% or 80% of people would not associate themselves with Christianity, or the Netherlands, or France now, or Belgium perhaps. And I see that for some reasons, really ironically, those countries that are the most secular are really, in these countries, the civil society develops the best. And this is very ironic. And I'm thinking, I don't buy it. It should be the opposite, really.
Yeah.
But I see, now maybe, in the context, in the last 7 days, in the context of the war, I'm seeing this uprising in Poland. But otherwise, before that, I would say, it's very paradoxical. But the secularized countries are more civil than our religious societies.
Yeah, and that's quite an indictment, isn't it? And it is a challenge again. How are we going to respond as the people of God to the needs of all of God's children? And how do we bring together our own spirituality, our praying, our fasting, but then how does that move us into action? Which is a question that one of the confirmants has asked. And as we told you, as we were kind of talking about what this webinar would look like, we're not only going to talk about the academic aspects, but we're going to, and the theological reflection, but we're also going to say there are some questions that members of our churches are asking, and this is what this confirmant had to say.
Yeah.
Is praying and fasting enough to stop violence and evil? And what is it that we can do to prevent wars such as the war against Ukraine?
Yeah. Well, very difficult questions.
It is.
But I have to tell you, a few years ago, Dalai Lama visited my city, and for a meeting of hierarchs in one of the Lutheran churches, and well, the hierarchs talked and they the wonderful theories, and at the end they signed a wonderful declaration, which now it seems that it meant nothing, but they signed this declaration, and they prayed for a long time. Really, it was wonderful. And then at the end, they asked Dalai Lama to say something, and he is this wide, very simple man, something like Yoda from Star Wars.
Yeah.
And he said just few sentences. He said, "Don't pray for peace. It doesn't make any sense. Do peace." And I thought, wow, this is really something. I mean, it might be difficult to agree from a traditional Christian perspective. We believe that we need to pray and we need to fast. But maybe in this context, again, doing peace, this is a kind of prayer and the kind of fasting that we need. This is the prayer in action, just like we see in the Bible parables in action.
Yes.
Of Christ in the Old and the New Testament. So maybe this is our prayer when I'm just giving my money and when I'm taking my money and sharing with another person, or giving the food, or opening my apartment, my house, and to prevent the wars. I have no answer to that. Again, I would say in the history of philosophy, we had these two conflicting schools. On the one hand, they were Pythagoreans, and they believed in the harmony of everything and peace of everything. And on the other hand, there was Heraclitus, who believed that there is a war and strife that is underneath of everything. And who was right? Maybe both of them were right. But Heraclitus would say that, okay, from time to time, we have this moment of peace. But this moment of peace, they require a lot of work. And I would agree that probably I would say that this state of peace and harmony is not as normal as I would normally admit or think. But the state of peace and harmony really requires lots of work and long work. So, the roots of the war in Ukraine may be really deep, but I think that this is the time that we should really be united in working and praying in action for peace and really helping other people.
Yes, indeed. Would you say that perhaps this doing peace and praying as doing peace could be compared to Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti, when he talks about how we are to be truly each other's neighbor, and how can we become truly each other's neighbor when we ourselves have to heal from trauma, from century-old biases, and have to cross boundaries, cultural boundaries, and find ways to create a sacred space where conversation can occur, perhaps as a first step. What are your thoughts on that?
I like that. I really like this encyclical. I think it's a beautiful piece. It's very different than the previous encyclicals of John Paul II or Ratzinger or the other popes. It's like a huge sermon, beautiful. And when he refers to Francis of Assisi, talking to the Muslim leader, and not really trying to convert him to Christianity, but sharing love of God with the Muslim leader. I think this is it. This is really this is the moment, really, when we are thinking of love of God, or the God who is the Father of all the people. And yeah, and this is and I would agree, with Pope Francis here, where I where I don't agree. I think it's, or when I think that he is not answering some of the questions, is again just the observation that the current state of things is somehow produced to a certain extent by churches and religions.
Yeah.
And I think we should be aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say, you are now also calling for interfaith collaboration, especially in light of this human tragedy. Have you seen that where you are in terms of interfaith groups working together, and how are you collaborating together?
Yes, I can see that, and it was in the past few months. Actually, we had some refugees from Belarus, and they were actually refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, that were somehow pushed to Poland by the Belarusian dictatorship. And I saw that one of the community that was very, very active in helping those people was the Muslim community. And this was beautiful, really. I mean, they didn't ask questions. Who are these refugees? What kind of people? They simply helped. And these are the Muslim people. They are Tatar, so they are, from the almost medieval times. Yeah. They came to Poland. They are there. They live there. They are part of our culture, and it's wonderful to see them being involved in that. And they are very open to cooperate with other churches. And also, what I really liked, it was, or maybe what was interesting, actually, it was not the initiative of Christian churches to cooperate with those Muslim people. Rather, it was the initiative of the Muslim to involve the Christian churches to help those people. And now we see the same things. But really, in Poland, we're undergoing this right now, this very fast process of secularization, especially with younger people. And I think what we see now, there are lots of young people who are involved in the help. And nobody is asking really this question, who you are, or what you believe, what is your, what kind of church you go to. I mean, it doesn't really matter. So again, it seems that the human race somehow is rising up. So if I had to refer to some kind of theological concept,
yes,
I would say, I can see imago Dei in work. So this imago Dei, the concept of imago Dei, it precedes all the other theological productions. It really states this simple fundamental issue that every human being is created in the image of God, or as Moltmann says, as the image of God.
Yes.
So when we take a look at another person, we see God, and then we looking at another person, we can always ask this question: what kind of God do you see? Sometimes the picture is sad or the image is sad, but now, when I'm asking this question, what kind of God do I see when I look at those people in Poland? I think this is the most beautiful image I can imagine, and I have never experienced anything like this in my life.
Yes. And of course, then that raises the question, how do we connect the imago Dei with the missio Dei, in terms of what does the expression of God's love going to look like? Especially past meeting this incredible initial need because of this horrific human crisis, which is what one of our Facebook participants is addressing to some degree when when it is said, while we understand that individuals and agencies are stepping in like never before, demonstrating humanity and love in action to make the stranger feel at home, what impact could all of this experience bring about in the life of youngsters who are the generation of the future?
I think it's a beautiful example.
Yes.
Yeah, they just see that it is important to care for another person, and that's really, really beautiful. And I think this might be the most important lesson they will have in their lives. And maybe out of this crisis, however horrible it is, maybe in the past, I don't know, but maybe in the past we will see, I have learned something from that. And if this is the case, maybe there is some kind of pedagogy that we can find, but maybe not. I don't know. But again, going back to this secularization issue.
Yes.
When we see this people just taking care of another person, not really asking questions about confessions, traditions, belief, doctrines, or whatever. And this is just after the pandemic, when we were somehow, at least in our context, departed from traditional churches. I think people realize, and this will be another maybe heresy, that they don't need church in a traditional sense to be good, to take care of another person. So maybe this is, and I'm not trying to say that churches are not important, but maybe this is the time, or maybe this is the context in which the concept of the church is somehow redefined.
Yes.
And I remember reading Ratzinger, who's far might not believed, my favorite theologian. Not at all. I really much prefer Hans King than Ratzinger. But
yes.
He's talking about that, about the crisis of these huge, big ecclesiastical institutions. And he's talking about the small communities of faith somehow. So maybe we see something like this. Maybe this was a prophetic voice that we see that is somehow, working out. Who knows?
Yes, indeed. And these are questions, as our wonderful confirmant raised a question to which we don't have the answers right now, but into which we must live by faith through our practices. And I just really would love to thank you for your wisdom, for your insights, for sharing how you and as a theologian, as a president of a theological institution, are addressing this current crisis. And I believe we would like to participate in assisting with the immediate needs. And I think, Mike, can you hear me, Mike Frontero? I believe that you are going to help us understand how we can do that.
Yes, that's right. Hold on a second here. Of the more than 1 million refugees that have fled Ukraine, many entered Poland. Evangelical School of Theology is taking in families and providing food and essentials for them. You may support their efforts at our website at upsem.edu/give and select the designation for Ukraine refugees in Poland. All proceeds will go to Ukraine refugees. Thank you all for streaming with us. Go in peace.